Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Stanisci of Candid Frank Live, and this is, of course, Candid Frank Live. We are part of the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate the app and leave a nice comment or two. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. As promised, here's Aaron William Freeland. Aaron, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Frank. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah, I got some stuff. I don't know how I'm gonna deal with it, but I do know I have something to deal with. Basically, I'm afraid to make myself the story, Aaron.
Get it off your chest. I'm pretty sure our viewers won't mind hearing about it.
Oh, not right now. Look,
Okay.
I've got to do some stuff first, and uh, anyway, I got to do some stuff first. Just an interesting time, I'll say that. A very interesting time. So we'll start as we like to do with our friends in the Canadian Football League. And of course, that means we'll start with the Owls, the Grey Cup champs. Why don't you give us what's going on there in the Owls camp?
Well, as you know, they were the Grey Cup champions last year. They need now, I think, going into this season to find a new source of inspiration. Last season, they were pegged to finish near the bottom of the standings.
In their minds,
In their minds,
in
yeah.
their minds, they
But they were pegged to finish near the bottom of the standings and managed to turn that into a victory. But
they did.
they've gone from being the hunters now to being the hunted. And Cody Fajardo said last year it was easy to draw motivation from people who said we were going to be ninth. Now there's people that actually believe in us, and we've got to find the secret sauce that works for us this year. So um, he, he's it's expected to be the number one player in the CFL now. Uh, they're going to be opening the season with a rematch Thursday in Winnipeg, and he's going to be going in as the reigning Grey Cup champion.
Yeah,
So this
the
is
bar is definitely high, definitely high. But they'll do well. They've got a very good they've got a very good team, a very good coach, and a very good general manager. They have in place the kind of perennial power that a lot of teams envy and vie for. The Argos hit that as well. With their head coach, with their GM, with their organization and players. We've seen Winnipeg do it. We've got BC starting to do it. So, depending on how long teams can hang on to that magic formula, that elixir that you need to put together, especially in football, um, well, we'll see. Things do change. We saw that with Hamilton in the past couple of years where they were so dominant and then weren't suddenly. That stuff happens. So we'll see how they go. Speaking of teams trying to get it together, we've got the Riders and the Elks. You've got us some injury reports for those two teams.
Yeah, so heading into the first week of the season, it's always nice to keep on top of this, especially for those of you who play CFL fantasy. So the Ruffies and Elks have shared their latest injury reports ahead of their season opening game on Saturday at Commonwealth. Now, the kickoff time has been changed, just as a note for everybody who has tickets and may not have received the email yet. It has been bumped to 2 p.m. To allow fans to enjoy Game 1 of the Stanley Cup final later that evening without it cutting into their football time. So in Saskatchewan, the Riders had no changes to their latest report. They remain without offensive lineman Noah Czar, while running back Nick Weeb, rookie receiver Dell Duncan Busby, and defensive back Jackson Ford will start the season on the six-game injured list. Defensive lineman Anthony Lanier II was a full participant for the second day in a row. The Elks were there without their third string quarterback, Jarrett Doge, for the second day, but got Lucier Purifoy back as a full participant on Wednesday. Wide receiver Gavin Cobb is out with a hip injury and went from a limited to a non participant on Wednesday. Notably, as well, linebacker Jake Taylor did not practice with a wrist injury. Um, so there you have it, folks. Tailor your teams accordingly. It's going to be an interesting first game.
It definitely is, and two teams that both want to change what is said about them this season. Now, Saskatchewan has less road to make up to do that. Edmonton is starting a little further back, so it'll be interesting. Let's talk about the former All-Star defensive back Marcus Sales joining the Riders.
Right. So Corey Mace announced on Tuesday that they signed the 2022 CFL All Star. He'd been released by the Lions after their final preseason game, so he's just basically available. Sales will be joining the Roughies with 5 seasons of CFL experience with the BC Lions and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He spent the last 3 seasons as a core piece in the Lions' defensive backfield with 158 tackles, 2 sacks, 6 interceptions, and 2 fumbles over 49 games. Prior to the Lions, Sales had been signed with the Minnesota Vikings and spent most of the 2020 season on the practice roster there. So he's been accruing a lot of valuable experience, which is evidenced by the fact that he was a 2022 CFL All Star. So
Absolutely.
very bolstering for them. Good to hear.
A couple of things. Grey Cup tickets are on sale. The game in BC that's in November. The tickets are already on sale, and they announced around the same time, within days, they announced the Jonas Brothers will be performing there. What do you think of that? Them being the halftime show.
Better than 50 Cent, I guess. There is some controversy around the artist that has been asked to perform at the BC Lions first game, and that being Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. I personally don't have an issue with the Jonas Brothers playing. Uh, I was there for the Grey Cup when Justin Bieber, Mariana's Trench, and Carly Rae Jepsen played the halftime show. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, if the Johnson Brothers aren't your cup of tea, sorry, the Jonas Brothers aren't your cup of tea, that is the perfect time to go get yourself a beer and use the facilities. It's simple as that. If you're not a fan, that's cool. If you are a fan, that's even better. They're going to be hard put though to follow Green Day, who put on an absolutely
Well,
fantastic show
in yours and my mind,
for sure. Yeah, I
right?
mean
In
we're
our mind,
obviously
yeah,
biased, but
yeah. I mean, we both like Green Day, and not that we don't like the Jonas Brothers. It's just not a group that I've gone out of my way to either download their music or it's not on my favorite playlist to say it.
and,
um,
and that's fair. I mean it's one of those things.
they're they came out as a boy band. If I called them that, would I be mean?
Well, I mean technically
Would
speaking, they're
I?
no longer boys, but that's
But when they
okay.
came out, I qualified that statement. I said
Yeah,
when they
that's
came
true.
out, they were basically a boy band.
They
They have
were.
since. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say they were a Disney manufactured band, so
Oh,
there was a certain
exactly.
amount of oomph behind them already as it was. But
Yeah, they were trying to acquire. No, I shouldn't say trying to acquire. It appeared that they were trying to get involved in that group of bands that like screaming young girls, right? And they weren't they weren't a band that really cut across. Um, you know, they had their thing, they had their space,
they
and
had their niche.
they did have their niche, and they did a good job of satisfying their niche. But now, in fairness to them, they did grow older and did actually have a couple of them did release solo albums and release music on their own. And now this is all part of them getting back together again. So, um, you know, the music that has come out since then has been music that's been enjoyed by people other. They've expanded their base, right?
Pretty much.
Individually and then as a group. And now this is an opportunity for, the CFL to bring in a group that does cater to and or is a group that younger people might like, in the hopes of trying to penetrate that 17 to 35 or 18 to 35 group of prospective football customers.
I mean, they have diversified a little bit. Some of them have tried acting careers. Some of them formed their own bands. Joe Jonas had a bit part in Zoolander 2. Another one of the Jonas brothers had a small role in the Jumanji movie, Back to the Jungle or whatever it was. So they've diversified their interests. I think with one of them now being divorced, I think they've joined further the group of elderly millennials slash younger Gen Xers. It's cross demographic appeal. I think is what they're looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? It's music. It's halftime. It's let's see what they do. It's not a group that I'm anticipating like I did with Green Day. I really did anticipate Green Day. Same thing with Shania Twain. Same thing with and to be fair and to be totally honest, I looked forward to Justin Bieber a tad more than these guys.
And that's fair because he's a Canadian boy.
Yeah,
It's one of those things that you sort of
yeah.
anticipate. But
Well,
eh,
right. They're a name act. We'll see how the fans react, and we'll see if it has an impact. I think it's the perfect group to be in BC because this group I think defines what BC is trying to do. I don't think there's a CFL team that's worked as hard to redefine itself as much as the BC Lions.
oh, for sure. And the ownership group has put an absolutely yeoman work in trying to rebuild the fan base and shift the demographic slightly to skew slightly younger. I don't know if you've noticed, Frank, but most of us CFL fans are getting a little bit longer in the tooth, and finding new blood to succeed us is sometimes difficult.
All
So,
right, I'm gonna just take it as a compliment that you're including me in your group. So we'll just leave it at that and
oh,
move on.
most definitely.
The NBA alleged Jonte Porter conspirator arrested fleeing to Australia. What?
So this is a case that we mentioned a few weeks back. A Brooklyn man was arrested on Monday and charged with conspiring with others, including Toronto's John Tay Porter, to defraud a gambling company. Per the criminal complaint, Long Five Fam, nicknamed Bruce, was apprehended while attempting to board a flight to Australia with a one-way ticket at JFK International. He reportedly had $12,000 in cash, two cashier's checks totaling 80,000, betting slips, and three cell phones on his person when he was arrested. Uh,
Nothing suspicious going on there.
no, and this all came out. Uh, Apparently, Jonte Porter allegedly ducked out of games because he had debts to bookies. So he was trying to skew games in such a way as to sort of pay off his debt. So the fact that he's got a co-conspirator and they've been arrested as well is yeah, not. I mean, it's not a good look for leagues that are trying to promote sports betting.
Um, no, not a good look. Speaking of not a good look, we're what? We're in just the beginning of June, right?
Hmm.
And there are thoughts now of the Jays being a deadline seller. Good Lord, Aaron, are they that
Yeah.
bad?
Uh, well, they're not that good. Let's put it that
Oh,
way. Uh, it has been a very rough start to the season for Blue Jays fans.
they definitely need new management. This management team has not been able to figure it out. And if they were able to figure it out, Aaron, I think it's pretty fair to say that they would have figured it by now. This management team has had plenty of time to prove that they've got it figured out. They do not. The Jays are going to have to move on from this president that they have since he wants to be a GM. Because if you're going to fire the GM, you have to fire the president because he considers himself both. And the assistant general manager, well, you know what? I've lost faith in that management team.
We're 60 games into the season. That's basically a third of the way through, and we're 28 and 32. We're sub 500 with a very decent hitting core that, for some odd reason, can't seem to knock in runs. Um, this is one of those things where you look at the lineup and on paper it looks absolutely fantastic. The actual execution, unfortunately, has been very lacking. Um, it's one of those things where you're definitely hoping for better because a 467 winning percentage and 14 games back at the third way of the season is just not going to cut it.
And the irony is, and I call it ironic only because I don't know what other word to use. It's ironic. They're in the perfect division to not make any excuses, Aaron. And the reason I say they don't have a reason to make excuses, they're in the Eastern Division, which is occupied by two of the richest teams in the American League, Boston and New York. And we those of us who think that it takes money to be successful, the Jays are at home to the Baltimore Orioles, who nickel nickel for dollar, they get a lot more for their money. So in this division, my point is very simple. You don't have to do it the Yankee or the Red Sox way. You can do it. You can do it the Baltimore way. Baltimore has proven. I know it's not called Billy Ball anymore, but whatever the hybrid of not spending money but doing it in a way that is efficient and figuring out an efficient way to have players who are really good and not cost you that much, and release players and or trade players at the perfect time that they might be asking for more money and their value is as high as it can be, and getting really good players in return takes a great scouting staff and takes a great baseball mind. um, Insert comment earlier about the Toronto management team. They are not the perfect baseball mind because
Yeah,
they can't do it with money and they can't do it without money. They can't do it.
I think what's so frustrating is we're seventh in the league when it comes to payroll, and we're currently not anywhere near seventh. It's just one of those. I don't know how to explain exactly what's going on here, but we're definitely in the bottom third of the league, and with what we're spending on payroll, we definitely shouldn't be there.
And this team has, as an organization, Rogers. Speaking of Rogers, um, they've made some interesting. I'm not very. I don't understand. You've got Rogers. I guess it's Ted Rogers. Is it Ted, the Ted Junior or whatever? Ted Rogers that runs the the company didn't want to have a women's basketball team under the MLSC umbrella. I don't know. I just don't think good decisions are being made by Rogers as a sports property, and they know the obvious. They know how to do stuff to make money or give an impression that they're really interested in having a really good team, but it's the players they can't put together. They've done a masterful job of turning Dunedin into a great place for players to develop, to practice, to get in shape. They've got a beautiful Dunedin. It's beautiful what they have. Their training facility is incredible. You go to the stadium. They've done some amazing stuff, some forward thinking stuff, having that, that bar hopping area between the left and right pole, right? They've got that going on. There's a lot of good stuff that they're thinking about. They're handling the preparation for the season. They're handling the customer experience. But what they're not doing, what they're not able to do, is put together a good baseball team. It's frustrating because for me, Aaron, none of those other two things matter if you can't get the baseball player part figured out.
No, it's absolutely befuddling to me that how they've managed to make a thorough hash of this. And like I said, it's not like they don't have the talent.
Or the money.
It just doesn't seem to be working.
They're spending obviously the company's allowing the management team to spend some money to the point where they're the seventh highest paid group in base in the American League, or both. Aaron, I'm sorry, I'm not sure about the
It's
number there.
it's the
Just the
entire
American,
league.
the entire league, even
Yeah,
worse. There
yeah.
you go. So that's 3.5 if you average it out, right? In the American League East, they're like 3.5. if you divide by two and assume that, you know what I mean? So basically, this is the problem with the Jays. The Jays, they've figured out how to create an interesting stadium. They've figured out how to have a great spring facility. They just haven't figured out how to put together a team, and they've wasted they remind me of the Leafs a lot. They've wasted a lot of opportunities where if they had made a better decision during a playoff game, they might have had a great season. But because of the mistakes made, they just ruin whatever opportunity they have to have greatness, and it's too bad.
Yep. Well, I mean, we'll have to see where they go from here. But as I currently said, they do currently look to be sellers at the trade deadline. So we'll
Yeah.
see who stays, we'll see
Can
who
they
goes,
sell
and if
the
anything changes.
president, the general manager? Can they put them up for sale?
Maybe we can get draft picks for them. You never know.
Yeah, maybe even a couple of practice baseballs, maybe even an extra glove. All right, let's go to the NBA. The NBA, of course, like the National Hockey League, is down to the big series.
Yeah, we're finally back down to it. Dallas, who looked to be completely out of it just a couple seasons ago, has now managed to crawl their way back in. They're back in the finals again. There's a lot of hope here. Everybody seems to be peaking at just the right time. So it seems like this is fertile breeding ground for more basketball players to find themselves on the out when it comes to betting, because who can resist a matchup like this? Dallas versus Boston. Mwah.
Absolutely. Tell me about Sergio Perez in Formula One. I know you're
So
anticipating something.
I am very much anticipating something. Esteban Ocon, first off, will not be racing in Canada. They're going to have a backup driver for him. He's on his way out. But Sergio Perez, this is a big question mark coming into this season because his ride expires at the end of this season. Red Bull has announced Tuesday that Checo has signed a 2-year contract extension through the 2026 Formula One season. He had been set to become a free agent. So, Christian Horner said, now is an important time to confirm our lineup for 2025, and we're very pleased to continue working together with Checo. Continuity and stability are important for the team, and both Checo and Max are a successful and robust partnership. Securing our first ever 1-2 finish for the team in the championship last year, Checo had a strong start to 2024 with second places in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Japan, and his podium finish in China. The past few races for Red Bull, admittedly, have been tough. There's a convergence on the grid, but we're confident in Checo and look forward to his return to proven form and performance that we so often see. So there you have it, folks. That is secure for the time being. As we mentioned on Monday, Esteban Ocon will be gone from Alpine racing at the end of the season. So the musical chairs is going to come up in about another 3 or 4 races here as we hit the summer break. Keep your eyes peeled.
Absolutely, really interesting. OHL's Flint Firebirds trade 16 draft picks and a pair of moose. Do you think the fact that they're an American team in the OHL, Flint, Michigan, is where they play out of, that maybe the Saginaw victory maybe inspired them to say we can do this too, and they don't want to be left behind? I don't know.
Uh, well, here's the thing. Very often in the OHL, you see a lot of draft picks being thrown back and forth. It's like teams have buckets of draft picks and they just grab a handful and go, "Yeet, here, have this." Um,
But
one of the
usually
last,
it's if they're the home team in the OHL final, you know what I mean? Or they're a team that is on the verge and they make a big move that causes a lot of draft picks to disappear, but not so many players coming back, Aaron. This is weird to me.
well, in their first move, they acquired Evan Conyon, Nolan Collins, and Matthew Mania from the Sudbury Wolves in exchange for 2 roster players and 9 draft picks.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, they sent 7 more draft picks, including another 2027 second rounder, to the Frontenacs in exchange for Christopher Thibodeau and a 2028 fourth round pick. So, I mean, they're basically trading players that were born in 2003 and 2004 at this point. Um, but
Yeah.
the last time we saw a trade of similar magnitude, Dallas Stars forward Jason Roberts was playing in the OHL. He was traded from the Kingston Frontenacs to the Niagara Ice Dogs for 2 players and 11 draft picks ranging from 2019 to 2024. So that trade is still paying off for the front. It's bizarre to me how they can continue to do this. We're looking at 2028 conditional second rounders, third rounders, and fourth rounders. These are players that are um, 11 to 13 years old right now. So it
Yeah,
just
so they don't really have their eye on anybody in particular.
no, they're just stockpiling picks at this point.
But when the time comes, they're going to be able to, they're going to be able to do some interesting drafting, and that's, I mean, that kind of patience, and making that kind of decision based on that kind of patience is a reflection of, the mirror image of a team giving those all away in a hurry.
Well, here's the thing: 8 of those draft picks weren't Flint's. Those
Right.
were draft picks that they acquired in other trades, including from Sarnia, Mississauga, the Sioux, Kitchener, and Barrie. So
Right. So all those draft picks they picked up for players that when they were doing some selling, and now they want to do some buy-in, and they're hoping this buy-in is going to put them in the mix for the. Obviously, it's the Memorial Cup. That's what they want to get.
for
I
sure.
mean, that's where they want to be. But I would think this kind of move, as I said, is if they were the home team, maybe they know something we don't know. Maybe they're promised a couple of years down the road that they get to be the home team. I can't believe that 2 American teams are going to be home back to back, right? And I'm sure
No,
they've already announced, right, who the home team this year is. So
it's going to Rimouski next year. So the
exactly.
Oceanic are going to be hosting in
It's got to
Quebec.
go to the West, and because it rotates on all three, the Quebec, Ontario, and Western leagues. So,
Exactly.
so this one here, this past year, was in the Ontario League. So I don't know if they've got some ideas. They must know something, because to make that kind of move, you're either saying we're going to do it with the players, or we're going to do it like Saginaw did, go to sleep, and then when the playoffs come, make it happen, like they did, which was awesome, by the way. Good for them. They made it work. That's a good
Oh,
thing.
they certainly did.
Tell me about Melody Daou. She retired. She's trading her skates for the coach's whistle.
So she was an MVP at the Olympics, an all-star gold medal collector, basically at the Worlds and Winter Games, and an original member of Montreal's PWHL roster and a dream chaser. At 32, Melody is finally hanging them up. She's trading her skates for a whistle at Collège Bourget in Rigaud, Quebec. Um, she's basically done it all. She's won gold medals at the Olympics, at the World Championships. Um, you know, uh, to have the ability to participate with Montreal in their inaugural season in the PWHL is a huge feather in her cap. Um, but as it stands, she had 4 goals and 9 points in 13 games across 3 Winter Olympics appearances, along with 6 goals and 16 points in 14 games at the Women's World Championships. Um, the fact that she can step away at this point in time and know that the game is in secure hands has got to be a wonderful feeling for her. So she's looking forward to being behind the bench at College Bourget, and I wish her all the best in that.
Yeah, good for her. Let's move over to the National Hockey League, and let's talk about the Oilers and their penalty killers. They're doing what it takes. I mean, special teams. We've talked about, Aaron. When we were talking about the Leafs and what they have to do. I mentioned that was the key thing for the Leafs to do, is their special teams had to outplay the opposition, Boston in particular, and that's what the Oilers have done. Their special teams have been outstanding. 1-2 in the playoffs. I mean, that's fantastic. And you know what the funny part is that it isn't really because of Connor McDavid that those two portions of the team are succeeding, which goes to the point that we always talk about. Star players are very important. They truly are. But teams win with the other guys in the playoffs, I think. It's the contributions they make that make a difference.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, this is the first time the Oilers have reached the Stanley Cup Finals in 18 years. Um,
First time with Connor McDavid.
yeah,
And he's been waiting for this.
Long past due. And they kept their power. They kept their penalty kill at 1,000. 0 for 28 for opponents on the power play.
Wow.
In the last
amazing.
10 playoff games. It's unbelievable.
It is. It's unbelievable. It's fantastic. And speaking of Connor McDavid, is he the reason they're going to win the cup, Edmonton?
It seems fairly likely. He is the best hockey player currently active in the world, and he's one of the biggest reasons that they're right there. He leads all playoff scorers with 31 points in 18 games and is among the top candidates for the Conn Smythe this year. Um, I would have made a strong point for him actually winning the Conn Smythe if his team hadn't made the finals. That's how impressive he's actually been. Um, I'm not sure if the coaching change from Jay Woodcroft to Chris Knobloch earlier this season was part of what helped get him going.
Oh,
Um, but him and Leon Draisaitl are definitely up there. Not to mention Zach Hyman is having the most productive stretch of his career with a playoff best 14 goals. Um, you know, Corey Perry is no longer the worm. He's actually a contributing member of the Edmonton Oilers offense. Uh, but the straw that stirs the drink is definitely McDavid.
yeah,
You
he's
saw
the
the
guy.
way he completely took over the final game against the Rangers. Um, you know,
Yeah, not the Rangers, not the Rangers,
or sorry,
the Stars.
the Stars. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Um, th- if I had a nickel for every time I did something like that. The thing of it is that Connor McDavid's greatness and what great players offer, what they offer, the most important thing, what I think is important for star players in the playoffs is that they don't get outplayed. They don't have to dominate. They don't have to dominate. But what they can do is negate the best checkers on the other team, which opens up opportunities for lines 2 and 3. And in the playoffs, we know, Aaron, the one thing we know is that when you're playing in the playoffs, you're playing with other teams that are good too. So, it helps when you have good second and third lines. Nuge has been a godsend. Nuge has scored goals and been playing in a way that, remember, he was a first overall pick. He isn't a guy who all of a sudden is playing way over his head. He's a guy who's achieving goals. Remember, Edmonton's the team that had what, like, it seemed like they had 2 dozen first
All of
overall
them.
picks. You know what I mean? And so they have guys who've been successful in their careers prior to the National Hockey League. We talked about Junior. We talked about the amount of draft picks that have changed hands. You talked about Robertson. All these things are true. And you talk about the coach. I wanted to add this too to your comment about the coaches. Does the coach make a difference? Aaron, sometimes I think it's less about the coach and what he does, but how he gets out of the way.
Yeah, sometimes there are coaches that do too much. Sometimes there are coaches that do too little.
I think this
Some
guy got out of the way. That's what I
I
like about this coach.
I genuinely think Knobloch just let him go. Just said,
That's
"Hey,
it.
boys, you guys know what you're doing here. I can't whip you any harder. You guys are going to be the best inspiration for that. So have at it."
And also the fact that they coached up their goaltender positively. At least hindsight being what it is, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about the way Skinner's game has been recreated during the season by the new goalie coach, and as a goalie yourself, that goaltending, it's 90% mental and 50% physical. Oh wait, the numbers don't add. I'm sounding a lot like, never mind.
Yogi Berra, yeah. No, you know what? Honestly, goaltending is a soft tissue game as opposed to a hard tissue game.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of what's up in here, and the way that Skinner has managed to come back. Even Jack Campbell has managed to put in a decent season down with the Bakersfield Condors, even after his collapse with the Oilers after signing a bumper deal with them. So
Yeah, and that phrase that I used for the coach works for goaltenders too.
yep,
Get out of your own way.
for
You know,
sure.
just get out of your own way, and good for them. Listen, they're a Canadian team. I get people who say, "Well, how can you say that?" I could never cheer for Edmonton. I'm a Calgary fan. I could never cheer for Toronto. I'm a Montreal fan. Grow up. They're Canadian teams. Be grateful for your neighbor. And our Edmonton fans deserve this. They're on the cusp and good for them. I wish them all the luck. I said the other day, I'm not going to BS anybody. It's just like, I was rooting for Montreal to win the cup, but I wasn't as disappointed as I'll be if Edmonton doesn't do it. So, that's the reality. But I'll give each Canadian team the support I think they deserve, because they're carrying the red and white flag that you and I both spend a lot of time admiring and rooting for.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about Florida, and we talked about why Edmonton could win the cup. Tell us why Florida will. What's the reason they'll end up winning?
Well, they certainly have motivation behind them. They got beaten 5 games by Vegas last year. There's a lot of the same cast members that are coming back for this show. Um,
The
they've had
revenge.
to beat 3 really good teams to get here. We're talking Tampa, Boston, and the New York Rangers. Um, Now, while the Oilers may be loaded up front with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, the edge Florida has in this particular department is depth. There are 14 forwards in this Cup final with more than 45 points this season, including playoffs. The Panthers have 8 of them. The Oilers lost 24 of the 35 games this season where neither McDavid nor Draisaitl scored. Florida also won the season series, which gives them a psychological edge coming into
2-0.
this one.
2-0.
Yep. Barkov has been the best two-way player so
Oh,
far.
he has always been, you know, the top player on that team.
Just absolutely dynamite. Gustav Forsling got an 8-year, $46 million extension this season, and it's starting really to look like an absolute steal. He is probably the best defenseman in the league, uh, amongst players like Aaron Ekblad, Brandon Montour, plus Oliver Ekman Larson and Dmitry Kulikov. Bobrovsky just seems to be getting younger. I'm not sure how that works. He's 35 years old, and he's
Well,
playing
his
absolute dynamite.
his talent dovetails with that Florida defense. He's a great crouch goalie. In other words, his eyesight is always low, which works because they have such a big defense. He's not going to be able to stand up anyway. So he has the perfect style for the defense that he has. He can look between kneecaps and stuff. So he's a great goaltender, and the goaltending and defense. It's all symbiosis, Aaron. We sometimes spend too much time concentrating on talking about how an individual can make a difference. And we keep forgetting sometimes, and we need to remind ourselves, I need to remind myself, that it is a team sport.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, let's be honest here. Paul Maurice has put in a lot of good work with the Florida Panthers too. Uh, he's won under his tutelage and guidance. The Panthers have won 25 playoff games. This matches the total of all other Panthers coaches combined in the first 28 seasons of franchise history. So
Well,
he, without a doubt, has been one of the most successful coaches that they've ever had in getting them to the promised land. Um, you
we're
know,
not surprised, right, Aaron? Because as soon as he left
yeah.
Winnipeg's success dropped drastically.
Oh yeah, Winnipeg absolutely felt like they tanked, and it's fairly obvious to see where his influence.
Remember what he said? Remember, he took the blame. He said, I can't seem to coach anymore. I don't have it. And you know what? He is such a devilishly smart man. He wanted to leave, and I know he saw what was going on when Winnipeg at the time. If everybody remembers when he left, there were players that were leaving, and then a few of them had left, and one that happened to go to, where did it go? Where did he go?
I think it
From
was New
Calgary,
York.
he went to Florida. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that he went there and the coach went there together. The coach knew about that player that they got from Calgary because he played against him and he knew what he was getting when he went to Florida. So yeah, a lot of times, Aaron, we get a lot of. Another thing is that I want to remind people. A lot of times we give credit to coaches and to players for being on really good teams and for making the teams really good. But sometimes with coaches, it's about identifying the kind of team that you can coach that will be a success. Some of that is in there too.
You know what? Honestly, I really do wish that a lot more coaches were more selective about where they chose to coach, as opposed to just going to whoever will pay them the most money. Paul Maurice knows what he has with this Florida team. He's been watching
Absolutely.
them for years,
He
and he
picked,
knows that they mesh and they gel with his particular coaching style.
and
So,
he likes snot hockey.
oh, for sure, and
Right.
they've got that experience with the
He
Florida
had it in
Panthers.
Winnipeg. He brought in, and he had it. He has it in Florida. It's no coincidence that they play the way they do. He may not deserve the credit for the way they play, but he sure knows how to use it. Let's talk.
Exactly.
Uh, Bobrovsky. We talked a little bit about him.
Yep.
You talked a little bit about his age. He plays incredibly. Let's move over to the Caps and give them some love. And there's a D man that's been activated.
Yeah. So, according to Cap Friendly, Bear originally went into the program on March 27th of this year. He missed the last 18 games of the regular season for the Caps and an additional four postseason games. It's been a really interesting year and a half for Bear, who injured his shoulder in last summer's IIHF World Championships. Was non-tendered by the Vancouver Canucks, which allowed him to become a free agent. And Because the injury took nearly 6 months to heal, Ethan had to wait until late December before ultimately signing. At the time of his signing and reporting in early December, uh, rumors had him going to the Maple Leafs, the Canucks, and the Capitals. Uh, the Caps signed Bear to a 2-year, $4.125 million contract, um, but he ended up going into the player assistance program just because he was having some issues that needed working on, and the league and the NHLPA and the assistance program feel that he's well enough to come back. And he had a really good start to his career out on the West Coast, and I certainly wish him all the best coming in with the Caps.
Let's slip down to the Maple Leafs since we like to cover them. We've got a few minutes left. Let's talk about them. Trey Living confirms interest in retaining Domi and Bertuzzi. Do you like the idea?
I wasn't sold on Bertuzzi at the start of the season. However, I did rapidly come around around the All Star break. Um, I
Yeah,
would be
by
interested in
us.
seeing if they. I would be interested in seeing if they could keep him. Not only that, I would be very interested in seeing if they can keep Domi, um, despite his father being a huge Habs fan and all of that food for raw.
Ugh,
Both of them actually proved their worth on a really interesting first line. Um,
they did.
I'd be interested in at least keeping them two together and seeing what else can work with them up the middle, especially if the plan is to either wait Marner out or trade him before the end of the season or re-sign him. At this point in time, if we can keep those two guys together and find a piece that works up the middle, I'd be happy with that.
Well, I'll repeat again. Domi proved that he could be a guy that can work for Austin Matthews. The 69 goals Austin Matthews got this year, a lot of them were on the line with Ty Domi's son, Max Domi. I'd like to see if that success can continue. It may need to, depending on what happens to Marner. And I want to remind folks that the Leafs could have traded Marner, and Marner had no say last year. They could have traded him, and they didn't. And it's not like they didn't see what was going on coming. I mean, they signed. If they the reason they didn't sign him, if it was because they knew they were going to get rid of or trade, right? Nylander. If they thought they were going to trade him, then there's a good reason why they didn't trade Marner. But I knew they had to trade one of them last year, and they didn't, and they're going to pay for it now. The question is, was it Trey Living that was dragging his feet and put the Leafs in this position, or was it the guy I think who it is responsible for this, and that's Shanahan? And now they've tied their hands because they didn't make the right decision when they could have. All this didn't have to happen, and it could have, it could have gone a different way. But with the Leafs, they don't just make mistakes, they compound them.
Yeah, they seem to make it worse by just layering up mistakes like lasagna.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
and not doing stuff. They vapor lock, right? And it's terrible. It's terrible. And we all knew, anybody with any kind of math understanding understood that the core four were not going to be able to all get raises. It just wasn't possible. They were already the salaries are already causing a problem. So too bad. And of course, as usual, the Leaf fans will pay the price, not the management team, and it's too bad. If they can trade Marner, I told you before, and I think letting him go, even for nothing, is subtraction by addition. He's a great talent, but he's not worth the money he thinks he's worth, and that to me is the problem.
And I think that's an issue that you run into here is a lot of players are overestimating their worth, especially those players that are unwilling to take
Well, because
big
they're
deals.
only looking at it as how much they make and how much somebody else makes that they think they're comparable to. They're not looking at the team. They're just not looking around them and saying, how is my salary going to impact this organization and this team? How much do I want to win? I don't think enough Leafs, especially the core four, ever bothered to think about that. By virtue of their actions, I can say it pretty safely. And it sounds mean, but it's true. It's too bad. Winning is not as important to some as it is to others.
And I harp on this all the time, and it makes me sound like a crusty old fart, and maybe I am, but I miss the time when players actually had to earn their money, and you would take a deal that would take you through being an RFA.
Well, get paid for good play that you displayed, not promises that you're going to make to play
exactly, and that seems to be the big problem here. You've got a whole bunch of players that you're paying a whole bunch of you're paying superstar money to a whole bunch of guys that are coming off maybe one good season, but the expectation is that they'll put in 3 or 4 more.
because
And it
because
hasn't been there.
because they're coming off their rookie contract, right? It's all about arbitration. It's all about signing and free the freedom of a player to move. Sometimes I think teams have to accept the fact that if a player's willing to move, how interested are they really in playing for you, and what kind of character do they actually have?
As a GM, that would be my first red flag.
Exactly.
We'd like to pay you this much. I can get more somewhere else.
Well,
Be my guest.
that's it. Yeah.
Once the contract ends, there's no loyalty in sports. Once the contract expires, the contract expires. If you don't want to take what I'm willing to pay you for your previous performance, not for how well you expect to play in the next 5 years, but how well you played the last 3, then I don't need you on my team.
You know what the scary truth is? Not the truth, but the scary, what could be the truth, is that we hear players wanting to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe that's just a lie. They really don't want to play for the Maple Leafs, but they don't want to say it publicly. So they say, well, okay, I'll play for you guys, but you're going to have to pay me a boatload of money. Because that's what it looks like. Aaron, that's what it looks like. It looks like they're saying, well, I wouldn't mind playing in Toronto, but you're really going to have to pay me a little more money to play here because there's way too much pressure to play in Toronto. It's too hard to play in Toronto. The fans expect so much, just because they treat us like gods. Does that mean that we have to play like them?
That is going to come back to haunt that boy for decades.
Oh, it is. You know what? It's only a game, right? It's only a game. But a lot of us shed a lot of heartache in the game. And a lot of players make a lot of money. So maybe it isn't just a game. Maybe it's a business. And maybe there's value that should be attached to what a business is selling. And their properties, if you will. And I don't like referring to players as properties, but essentially that's what they are. And they have to have a better decision-making process on deciding what properties they include in their business. And the Leafs have not done a very good job of that. They've tried to. We've seen what looks like they tried to, giving up draft picks hand over fist. But it's never been enough. It's never been enough. And that's too bad.
And I think that's the most frustrating thing out of all of this is you see the potential.
Absolutely.
It's there. And the other issue that you run into now is, oh, sure, I want to play in Toronto. Well, if you want to play in Toronto, we want to put other players around you to play with you. The salary that you're asking for is not allowing us to do that.
And that's all they have to say. And if you put us in that position, that's why they should have traded Marner last year. And what they should have said to Nylander and Matthews before they signed their contracts, look, guys, here's what's going to happen. We're going to give you what you want. Marner's gone. You can forget about him being on your team. And we'll and you're going to have to tell him that you don't want him on the team. It's that simple. I mean, you don't really say that to them, but you can leave the implication that that's the case because the money they took forced the Leafs to consider Marner not being on the team at this point. But, can't see past their eyelids. That's the problem. The players can't see past their eyelids sometimes. Hey, tell me about Marner and where he might go. I hear there's 6 places he could go.
Yeah, there are certainly 6 places that he could potentially go. We're looking at Buffalo. Um, the problem is with that, I don't think the Leafs would want to trade him within their division to end up facing him 4 games a year. So that's probably off the table.
Well, he might be willing to go there. It's close to Toronto.
Oh, that's true. Carolina Hurricanes is another place. They're really looking to retool. They have a 6.64 save percentage, which puts them right behind the Leafs, who had a 6.64. The only problem here is Marner would only be bringing elite scoring for the regular season to the Canes, and they need playoff scoring. Chicago, they're really, really, really trying to rebuild. It might be a year too soon for the Hawks to try to bring him in to sort of throttle up, as it were. Nashville is another one. But the problem is they're
I like
looking.
Salt Lake City.
I think Salt Lake City, honestly, final thoughts on this whole thing. Utah would probably be the best. Utah or Seattle, I'm sort of in a toss-up for.
He's a star player.
Yeah, but the problem is, they need him to score during the playoffs. And now, if he goes to Utah, that might not necessarily be an issue.
That's the
not
point.
necessarily make the playoffs anyways.
You understand what I'm saying?
I
they
do.
Need to sell tickets, right? The regular season is how you sell tickets. That's how you sell tickets. How you do during the regular season. And it's that saying that we've talked about here. You need players to get you to the playoffs, then you need players to get you through the playoffs. Getting to the playoffs is how you interest the fans, how you get them excited, and you're able to sell tickets because of the excitement of making it to the playoffs. Because in the NHL, making it to the playoffs is a pretty tough thing to do.
For sure.
So that's something worth. We got another minute, Aaron. Tell me a little bit about the goalie market. And I got to say, doesn't the Skinner situation tell you it isn't about getting the best goaltender? Bobrovsky's a great goaltender, but he's at a level. There aren't 2 or 3 other goaltenders that have been as good as him in the playoffs in the past 20 years. So, unless you can get a guy like him, you're not worried about getting the best guy. You got to get a guy like Skinner. All of a sudden, you can coach him into a good goaltender.
Well, I'm going to give you a few names here and just give me your impressions. Jacob Markstrom could potentially be available. The Flames are offloading pieces from the roster this season and stepping back into a rebuild.
You're buying low there. You could buy low there.
Yeah, Linus Ullmark, after splitting duties with Jeremy Swayman and combining to win the William Jennings Trophy a year ago, basically ended up taking a back seat after Swayman took over.
Do the Leafs have a second goaltender to ensure that happens? Because I think he does his best not playing every day.
Yeah, no, I think the only one I can think of is maybe Wall and maybe Jones. Then you get to guys like Philip Gustafson and Eunice Korpisalo. Gustafson with Minnesota.
Not Korpisalo. For me, he's too small.
Albus Merzlikins with Columbus is also one who could potentially be available.
Small too.
And Darcy Kemper.
I'm not a small guy. Darcy Kemper's a little bigger. He's one of those guys that coach him up and he could be the goaltender. Because there's 2 ways to go with goaltending, Aaron. We've learned it, right? You've got your standard Carey Price type of guy, Bobrovsky, right? And then you got the guy who's playing on his head that he's never done before, that has a great playoff run. Which Skinner is fitting into that category with a little bit of slippage earlier in the playoffs.
Before we pull the chute on this whole thing, one last player name that I want to throw out there is Laurent Brossoit.
Oh, come on! Now you're. I see where you're going there, and I understand what you're saying, and I get it. You're hoping that he catches fire in a bottle, lightning in a bottle. Yeah. Well, it's possible. Yeah, you never know. But that's the whole point of what I said. It ain't necessarily how good the goaltender is. Goaltenders have to do a certain. They have to. I'm a Grant Fuhr goaltender fan. I love the goaltenders that they're not great all the time, but man, when you need them to stop the puck, They do it. And that's what Skinner did, and that's what got Edmonton in the Stanley Cup final. This was fun, Aaron.
This has been great, Frank. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, a full hour, and we survived. I'm so proud of us.
A little thing.
Thank you, Aaron. For Aaron William Freeland, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank Live, Aaron, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Candid Frank Live, other news, entertainment, and sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Ciao for now. Don't forget Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube.